under a blanket of soft clouds and blue oceans. Earth spun slowly in its orbit, unaware of the judgment passed against it. Billions of lives bustled through routines, conflicts, dreams, and digital noise, completely ignorant of the votes cast light years away. The Galactic Council, a collection of the oldest and most dominant civilizations in known space, convened not in secrecy, but in arrogance. The Terran species was flagged as erratic, emotionally unstable, and disproportionately inventive for its technological tier. To them, it was an anomaly wrapped in flesh, fire, and rebellion. Despite no interstellar travel, no colonies, and no representation in council matters, Earth had a pattern that disturbed the collective. They created weapons before unity, destroyed each other with tools meant for creation. And worse, they kept surviving. Every extinction event, every global conflict, every systemic collapse, followed by a rebirth fiercer than the one before. The vote was simple. Eliminate the anomaly before it matures. Not out of fear, none would admit that, but because humans refused to be predictable. No ambassador was sent. No warning delivered. Just ships, 7,700 of them, armed with plasma fields, planet crackers, and the arrogance of 1,000 victories carved into their hulls. They arrived at Sol like a swarm, blotting out starlight, carving lines of dread through sensor grids. Earth's response was laughably primitive. A few desperate transmissions. Fighter jets scrambled from airstrips that meant nothing in the vacuum of space. Satellites blinked out like dying fireflies. The orbital defense systems cracked within the hour. Stations once filled with life became frozen coffins, tumbling silently. The first city struck was unprepared, targeted not for strategic value, but as an opening statement. Fire tore through steel and glass. Skyscrapers folded like wet paper. The oceans boiled where impact clusters rained. Screams never reached the stars. They were devoured by the atmosphere's roar. The fleet split, each empire taking a continent to pacify. Within days, Earth's skies turned black with ash. Human militaries launched whatever they could. Missiles, drones, railguns swatted from the sky before they breached orbit. The invaders laughed through their encrypted channels. The Council considered the act complete. The galaxy turned its gaze elsewhere. And then Earth went quiet. No distress calls. No diplomatic pleas. No retaliatory strikes. No mobilizations. The feeds showed dust and ruin. Satellites launched from the Armada could only transmit still images. Abandoned cities, flickering power grids, empty roads stretching into the shadows of crumbling hills. They expected submission, but the silence was too perfect. It lasted 3 weeks, long enough for boredom to creep into the occupiers, for command posts to relax, for engineers to begin drilling operations. A few minor skirmishes were reported. Sabotage, they claimed. Resistance fighters using leftover tech. No cause for alarm, until a fleet command node, responsible for coordinating all Southern Hemisphere units, went dark. Instantly. No distress signal. No logs. One moment it was calculating geothermal scans. The next it was gone. Replaced by a signal. Repeating. Calm. Rhythmic. A binary sequence encoded within a universal protocol used across the empires. They decoded it and reread it. We heard your warning. Here is ours. Still, the Council dismissed it as a glitch. The Empire holding command over Earth deployed scout teams to investigate. None returned. And then, without sound or light, the night sky above the Pacific pulsed red. 12 command ships, each equivalent to a city in mass, exploded simultaneously. Internal detonations. Engine cores overridden. Fail-safes disabled. Escape pods ejected in reverse trajectory into Earth's atmosphere, burned alive. The message repeated again, this time galaxy-wide. We were not at war. You ended that option. Panic spread faster than light. Task groups repositioned. Planet crackers were charged. Every human settlement was targeted for sterilization. The extermination was to be absolute now, not a lesson, but an erasure. But before the fleet could fire, Earth responded. It did not respond with missiles. Not with ships. but with control. Thousands of alien ships experienced identical failures. Power drained. Artificial gravity reversed. Weapon systems detonated while docked. Diagnostic logs rewritten in their own languages, with a single word replacing everything: payment. When fleet commanders attempted to override, their consoles displayed a countdown, one that synchronized across every species. Not from a central source, but embedded in their codebase. They shut off engines, jettisoned warheads, disconnected core processors. It didn't matter. At zero, over half the ships in Earth's orbit crashed into one another in coordinated collisions. Not due to hacking, but pre-programmed sabotage built from within. It was impossible. Humans didn't have access to alien tech, let alone understanding of their architecture. But they did. Somehow. One remaining flagship managed to escape Earth's orbit. As it climbed beyond the exosphere, its cameras turned back. The crew watched as the cloud cover parted. A series of massive metallic doors opened across the surface of Earth's poles, deserts, and deep oceans. The structures were not new. They had been there, waiting. Not for conquest, not for glory, but for the moment Earth would need to say, no more. Inside the flagship's bridge, the crew received one final message. No sound, just a recording of Earth as it had been before the invasion. Children playing, elders walking under trees, scientists building, artists dreaming. Then a voice spoke. No accent, no origin, as if the planet itself had found a voice. You feared what we might become, and so you came to destroy who we were. Static. You failed. The crew died seconds later when their life support failed, killed not by humans, but by their own ship, convinced it had been infected. The galaxy waited for Earth to speak again. It didn't. The silence stretched longer. But every empire knew something had changed. The human race was no longer seen, but it was felt. In every decision, in every negotiation, in every hesitant exploration of the unknown. Not because of power, because of what they proved. That silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes it means wrath. The council gathered again, not in celebration, but in fear-wrapped as strategy. 1,000 analyses failed to identify how a pre-spacefaring species dismantled the most advanced invasion force in galactic history. The empires whispered theories. Some said the Terrans had found ancient weapons buried in their planet. Others blamed rogue AI or internal betrayal. No one spoke the real fear aloud, that humans had done it themselves, that they had learned too much, too fast, and kept quiet until the right moment. Across the galaxy, traffic through Sol system halted. Trade routes redrawn. Probes sent by proxy, smaller, shielded, designed to self-destruct if detected. None returned. Still, there were no signs of pursuit, no fleets launched from Earth. The planet resumed its rotation in silence. The only confirmation of life came from strange energy readings, pulse signatures previously unknown to science, rising from deep beneath Earth's crust. The empires weren't just terrified of what humans had done. They were terrified of what they might do next. So they waited, rearmed. Fortified borders never meant to be borders. Satellites that had once gazed outward for knowledge were now surveillance, eyes staring toward Sol. And Earth? Earth watched back, but said nothing. Months passed. Then one signal broke the stillness. Not from Earth, but from the Glaxis frontier. A mining colony found something. Or rather, something found them. It arrived like a meteor, small and fast. No known signature. No radiation. It embedded in the crust without explosion, melted through steel, and activated. The workers never saw who deployed it, only the aftermath, a perfect sphere, smooth as glass, hovering in the ruins. Before it self-destructed, it transmitted one image to every listening station across 200 light years. A human face, calm, expressionless, no name, no context. Then a phrase in every known galactic language. You open the door. No empire claimed responsibility. The colony was shut down. A black level event was declared. But it didn't stop. Other orbs appeared. Each time, somewhere remote. A forgotten moon. A derelict station. A dead world long dismissed. Always followed by silence and the same message. You open the door. The council shifted from paranoia to desperation. Research into human cognitive patterns became priority. Their art, language, media, all dissected. Teams of xenopsychologists were deployed to uncover how they thought, how they planned, how they endured. And one by one, those researchers began to turn, not against their empires, but toward something else. A growing belief that humans were not reacting, but preparing, that they had always been preparing. Entire libraries of intercepted Earth data, once considered worthless culture, became sacred texts. Their fiction dissected for truth. Their war games studied for pattern. The word human shifted in meaning, whispered in corners by commanders and scientists alike, not as a species, but as a principle. Then the shift occurred, not on Earth, but within the galaxy itself. Ships began disappearing, not human, alien. Patrols lost with no trace. Beacons found melted, their data scrambled. Patterns emerged. The ships lost were always those armed most heavily. The locations always close to military borders. Empires accused each other. Small conflicts ignited. What had once been united in conquest began to fracture. One system, Zalterra Prime, went completely dark. A hub for weapons manufacturing, protected by a dozen dreadnoughts. No signs of invasion. No wreckage. Just a gravity well where the planet used to be. When scouts investigated, they found a single object floating where the defense station had been, a black cube with smooth surfaces. No interface. No energy. Just a carved message in perfect glyphs. It was never your galaxy. Panic turned to collapse. Empires began recalling fleets from deep space. Colonies were abandoned. Researchers burned data that once defined entire cultures. The Council disbanded its military wing, desperate to send a message of peace to Earth. But Earth did not respond. Because Earth didn't need to. They watched. Every time a transmission was sent, it was intercepted. But not blocked, simply stored. Humanity had grown beyond retaliation. This was deterrence not by threat, but by reminder. They weren't playing a galactic game. They were rewriting it. And then something happened no one expected. Not an attack. A gift. A data capsule shaped like a Terran seed was found embedded in a Comarian listening post. It contained no malware, no trap, just a vast compendium of Earth knowledge. Mathematics, physics, history. Not primitive theories, but equations refined beyond galactic understanding. And one field in particular, energy compression. Technology far beyond Council capabilities. Clean, infinite, sustainable. It was an offering. The Council gathered in secret. Split in two. Some wanted to return the data unopened. Others believed it was the key to survival. If not now, then later. They accessed it, began adapting it, and found that it worked. Perfectly. Efficiently. As if it were built not to dominate, but to uplift. Still, no human presence arrived. No demand. No message. And yet, every time the tech was replicated, the recipient experienced something strange. Visions. Dreams. Voices, not heard, but understood. Whispered promises. Not of conquest. Of understanding. One admiral, years after retiring, published a final message before disappearing. It contained only one sentence. They don't want our worlds. They want us to see. And still, the disappearances continued. But now only those who resisted the integration of the human gift were targeted. Those who weaponized it vanished. Those who studied it prospered. A new order began to form, not of war, but of reverence. Empires became guardians. Scientists became diplomats. Enemies became messengers. Because they realized what the humans had already known. You don't conquer chaos. You become the mirror it sees itself in. The Council tried once more to contact Earth. Not with a fleet, but with a single vessel. No weapons. Just one emissary. A synthetic mind built from 10 different species, designed only to listen. It was accepted. The ship disappeared for 7 Terran days. When it returned, it spoke only one thing before its systems fried beyond repair. They are building something. That was all. No coordinates. No details. Just awe. And for the first time in history, the galaxy obeyed without understanding. They stopped trying to predict the humans. They stopped trying to control them, because they realized too late. The warning wasn't a threat. It was a mercy. There was no declaration, no visual spectacle, no grand event to mark the shift. But everyone felt it. Across thousands of systems, across empires once bloated with arrogance, something fundamental changed. The galaxy had gone quiet, not in peace, but in preparation. Because even without direct contact, even without words, every civilization now understood. The humans weren't retaliating. They were reshaping the rules. In deep space observatories, sensors registered fluctuations not bound to any natural law. Gravitational anomalies formed stable patterns. Space-time bent with precision. These weren't errors, they were signs of construction. Artificial, deliberate, human. No empire could locate the epicenter, and yet the ripples spread outward from the direction of Sol. Engineers and physicists alike faced the same outcome in their simulations. Whatever it wasn't a weapon. It was infrastructure. Something large enough to affect gravitational flow, time dilation, and energy resonance on an interstellar scale. Something permanent. Galactic leaders met in secret, not to plan resistance, but to issue surrender. Not out of weakness, but wisdom. They called it the Silent Accord. No alliances, no armies, only a simple tenet. No ship would approach Sol without explicit, undeniable invitation. None would send probes, none would scan its orbit, none would provoke a species that had clearly outgrown conquest. But it was too late for some. The Threx Dominion, one of the last warmongering civilizations, refused to bend. They had avoided the First War. Now they believed they could claim the galaxy during this moment of hesitation. They launched a covert expansion into human-ignored sectors, rebuilding fleets, exploiting collapsing empires. They believed humanity's silence was weakness, and they intended to fill the vacuum with fire. Their first move was swift. 6 systems overtaken in 2 weeks, broadcasting propaganda that mocked the Accord. Their transmissions ended with a singular phrase: "If they dare, let them come." They never saw what did. It wasn't a fleet. It wasn't a weapon. It was a shadow. Across the Threx systems, power died, not in bursts, but in silence. Screens went dark. Gravity shifted. Orbiting moons slipped free. The Threx High Command issued emergency orders, scrambled escape routes. But every ship vanished in the same way. No explosion, no trace. Just gone. Then, the messages started. Every Threx-controlled device received the same transmission, a recording of Threx war crimes, but not from public records, from secret vaults. Internal conversations. Hidden plans. Horrors never meant to see light. Humanity didn't respond to their challenge. They simply exposed the rot and let it collapse under its own weight. Within days, the Threx Dominion ceased to exist, not conquered, but unraveled. Their citizens revolted not against enemies, but their own leaders. Not a single human soldier landed on a Threx world. They never had to. The galaxy understood. Humanity was no longer a species. It was an intelligence, a presence, a force. And then the stars began to dim. It wasn't literal darkness. It was observational. Sensors could no longer resolve the positions of hundreds of stars. Their light bent, distorted, hidden behind some kind of field. The only consistent point of reference was Earth, glowing dimly, still orbiting its sun, as if nothing had changed. Attempts to investigate were met with silence. Not destruction, just erasure. Ships that crossed into the occluded zones were never found. Even unmanned probes suffered the same fate. Some believed humanity had built an observational perimeter. Others thought they'd created a simulated version of space-time. Either way, the conclusion was the same. They had established control over reality's interpretation itself. And then a breakthrough. Not through contact, but through resonance. A team of Utari philosophers discovered that the strange pulses in galactic background radiation followed a pattern, a sequence, long and repeating. It wasn't random. It was a message. Not words, but mathematics and emotion, encoded together in the structure of the universe. A form of communication that required more than intelligence to decipher. It required empathy, connection. It spoke in tone, not text. And once understood, the translation was unmistakable. We are becoming what you feared, not because you harmed us, but because you woke us. It wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was inevitability. They had transcended the concept of empire. Their retaliation was evolution. A council of elder civilizations, species thought extinct or dormant, resurfaced. They issued a request to speak with the humans directly, not through probes, not through diplomats, but by invitation. They wished not to challenge, but to witness. A response came, not a message, a corridor, a stable rift, opened in a dead zone of space, pulsing with energies never documented. One by one, vessels entered. One by one, their return changed. They spoke of a place outside of time, a construct where stars moved like thought, where machines spoke in dreams and history played itself in real time. They saw simulations of their own worlds, rendered with impossible accuracy, including futures not yet lived. They weren't warned. They were shown. Humanity had built a model of the galaxy, not to control it, but to understand it. And now they were remaking it physically into a reflection of that model. They weren't imposing their vision by force. They were letting reality align itself with their understanding. Not domination. Synchronization. The species that returned formed a pact, not to stop the humans, but to follow their blueprint. Not blindly, but willingly. Because for the first time, they saw a version of the galaxy not ruled by fear, but by potential. Not peace enforced by weaponry, but by consequence. Anyone could prosper, if they didn't try to rule. And then Earth finally spoke. Across every system, every channel, every species' native tongue, a singular transmission arrived. No voice, just text. This is not a warning. This is what comes after. This is humanity's second age. And with that, the stars brightened again. Sensors recalibrated. Communication stabilized. The occluded regions resolved themselves into newly ordered structures. Rings, arches, constructs spanning light years, each pulsating in harmony. Not war machines. Not weapons. Ecosystems. Networks. Conduits for life and data and thought. Humanity hadn't hidden the stars. They'd given them purpose. And with them, purpose to the galaxy. Not through fear. Not through conquest. But through the silent, relentless force of those who endured, learned, and evolved. They had shown restraint when they could have annihilated. Offered knowledge when they could have hoarded. Restructured chaos without claiming thrones. And now, every species knew the final truth. The fire had never been vengeance. It was renewal. The fury had never been rage. It was the ignition of understanding. And in that silence that followed, in the stars, now humming with quiet order, the galaxy whispered the final lesson. When humanity gave a warning, it wasn't to be feared. It was to be believed.